I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And we will now move on to roll call.
Councilmember Mazzoni?
Here.
Councilmember Palfini?
Here.
Councilmember Verasan?
Here.
Councilmember Wetstein?
Present.
Mayor Parham?
Present. Okay, next is the acceptance of agenda and urgency items.
I make a move to accept unless there's anybody that has any changes. Okay.
We have a
No.
motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any changes requested for the agenda tonight? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. All right, this is the point for non-agenda public comment. If there's anybody in our public that would like to comment on anything that's not on the agenda, now is your time.
That's not on the agenda.
All right, well, we have no non-agenda public comment. We'll now move on to council member announcements, meeting reports, and comments, and we'll start with Councilmember Verasan. Okay,
Turn your microphone on. Little green light. There you go.
I have no report at this time.
okay. Councilmember Mazzoni?
I just have one thing. I had a LAFCO meeting this week. There wasn't a lot to report. They're just going through their handbook, redoing the handbook to make sure all the procedures and everything that needs to be taken care of are, and that's handled. We have another meeting scheduled for next month to go a little bit deeper in a couple other items that haven't been discussed yet or not able to discuss at this time. So it was normal, about 20 minutes for the meeting.
All right, Councilmember Wetstein.
I would just like to thank the Public Works Department. We have had quite some heavy snow lately, and also the Weed Police Department, who's been working diligently, especially in South County, to make sure that our roads are open so that our residents of Weed have access to where they need to go. I know it was quite a feat with the heavy snow, but I did note that they did a wonderful job, and I just want to extend the thanks on that.
All right. Mayor Pro Tem Palfini.
I just want to add what Melissa said, Councilwoman Melissa said. I'd also like to not only thank the fire department, the Public Works and the police department, but the fire department has been over across the street from my house about 8 times because my neighborhood apparently is getting pretty damn old. So, so I thank you guys for showing up and helping folks out. So, that's it.
All right. Well, I would like to echo the thanks to staff all around. I know here at City Hall, people have been coming into work. Public Works, everybody sees you guys out plowing. I've seen PD and fire department out, multiple times dealing with, issues in the storm. So appreciate for the small staff, the amount of effort that everyone's putting in to do their part to keep the city moving. So, it's been quite the late storm. All right. Now I'll move on to the consent agenda. Sorry?
I do have something that I'd like to announce before you take action on the consent agenda item, but go ahead and
Okay.
provide your initial introduction.
All right, so our first item on the consent agenda, item A, by administrative by motion, council will consider resolution number 02-2025, appointing Jill Porterfield to the position of city treasurer. Item B, finance by motion, council will consider appointing resolution number 03-2025, adopting finance policy number 111 regarding bad debt. Item C, human resources by motion, council will consider approving an employment agreement with Chief of Police Mayberry as acting city manager. Item D, city clerk by motion, approve minutes from January 6, 2025 special meeting, January 9th, 2025 regular meeting, January 16th, and February 3rd, 2025 special meetings. Item E, finance by motion, approve payment warrants dated January 8th, 2025 through January 22nd, 2025, including any voided warrants totaling $730,692.73. And item F, finance by motion, approve and file month-end report for January 2025. City Attorney has a,
Yes, under the Brown Act, we are required to provide a short oral summary of any action taken on executive management salaries. And so just to reiterate, on item C of the consent agenda is the approval of an employment agreement for acting city manager. That employment agreement is identical to the acting city manager employment agreement that the council approved last June for Chief Mayberry. The differences are the new start date, which would be tomorrow, February 14th, and for a term until a new interim or permanent city manager is appointed, but with the same salary as previously provided for, which was, I believe, $13,904 per month. And with that, I've concluded my oral report of the summary.
thank you.
Then I'll make a motion to,
Well, first, do we have any items that the council would like to remove from the consent agenda?
okay. And probably public, you should probably ask them.
And do we have any public comment on items on the consent agenda before we move forward? All right.
With
There appears to be
that,
none.
I will make a motion to approve the consent agenda, including the amendments to item C for human resources. That's it.
Just a point of clarification, there was no amendments to item C. I was just providing a oral
Information?
summary of
Okay.
what item C is, yeah.
Okay, then I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as written.
I second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? No. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, next is council business. Item A, public safety. By motion, council will consider encroachment permit to close Main Street from Inez to Division on April 20th, 2025 for the 420 Festival from 0600 until 2200 hours, and waivers of Weed Municipal Code 9.16.010 and 9.16.030 for outside sale and consumption of alcohol within the event boundaries only. We have a staff report.
So this is a request by local business La Florista to have a Main Street closure from Inez to Division. This will be a one-day event. Will be on a weekend, on a Sunday, so there won't be any need to keep traffic flowing into the bank parking lot as previous festivals required. The difference this year is they want to put a temporary fence down the middle of Main Street. I have checked with the fire department. They are okay with that, in which they would maintain the fire lane and the northbound lane of Main Street. And then, of course, the waiver for alcohol and sales within the event between Division and Inez Street. As of 5 PM, I was not aware that they had turned in their required signatures from the businesses within the closure that we require every year. I have not seen that. I don't know if it was turned in, so we have not received that.
Okay, is that required for the council to take action?
That was a stipulation that they provide an agreement from all the businesses within the event boundaries, that they agree to the closure of the street in front of the businesses.
Okay. All right.
Can they bring this forward next month? When is this? 4 and 20, right?
Right, so there would be time to again, have it before council next month if they wanted to.
And is there any proponent for La Florista here today in the audience to speak on the encroachment permit? Okay, doesn't look like it. Okay,
Do we
well,
want to table it?
well, that's up to the council if somebody wants to motion to table.
Make a suggestion to table it till someone could be here, like next month.
Okay,
So they could go back on the agenda, obviously, next month, and just, that gives them enough time to get everything in order. Of course, it's up to everybody else.
okay, so it sounds like we have a motion to table this item. Do we have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, any further discussion? All right, all in favor of tabling this item until next month?
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion carries. Next item, item B, code enforcement. By motion, council will consider introduction and first reading by title only of ordinance number 481, 2025, adding section 16.04.145 to chapter 16.04 of the Weed Municipal Code pertaining to the occupancy of condemned property.
Okay, sure. So, under the health and safety code, sometimes premises are labeled red tagged, unsafe to occupy. We've had a problem recently with several structures in which, despite the red tag, we have people continuing to occupy those. This ordinance will make it a misdemeanor to remain inside that premises unless you're in there for the purposes of rectifying the problem, which typically is a contractor, but you will not be able to remain and live inside the red tag premise in violation of the health and safety code.
All right. Any discussion from the council?
No, I would note that I appreciate the look at the ordinance and making sure that it's a clean reading and that it's easily enforceable. On the rendition that is presently in front of the council, I would note that I think there's a clear directive to law enforcement on what's necessary to make a determination if there is an offense.
I have no questions. Questions, Pat?
Do not have any questions.
All right.
I'm good. I do appreciate actually the same thing as far as cleaning things up. It's kind of one of our council's objectives is to clean things up in our ordinances, so.
Any public comments on the ordinance? All right, there's no public comment.
No public comment. Well, I make a motion for the introduction and first reading by title only of ordinance number 481-2025, adding section 16.04.145 to chapter 16.04 of the Weed Municipal Code pertaining to the occupancy of condemned property.
Okay, I'll second that. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item, item C, code enforcement. By motion, council will consider introduction and first reading by title only of ordinance number 483, 2025, adding chapter 8.10 pertaining to the unauthorized removal of shopping carts from retail establishments and to facilitate retrieval of abandoned shopping carts.
We're proposing this ordinance to rectify the problem of shopping carts. We currently have 3 businesses within town that utilize shopping carts. They end up anywhere from several blocks to several miles away from those businesses. This would require each business utilizing shopping carts on their premises to have a written plan for collecting those carts. They would be required to collect the carts when notified, and if they do not do so within a 72-hour period, then they potentially could be cited. But this is to eliminate the ongoing problem with the carts around town, which tend to become, in my opinion, garbage receptacles. In one instance, I collected 17 shopping carts and grouped them together and went into the business. They did go and get them, but and sometimes we do have a problem getting those carts collected. This puts the responsibility on the business. It doesn't require the city to pick them up, and it ultimately there is potential for citation on this, but hopefully they just pick up the carts and take them back.
So if the council does adopt this ordinance, obviously ordinance is going to affect 30 days after the second reading or adoption. This also provides an additional 60 days after that for the businesses to develop the plan, to provide the necessary signage on the cards as well. So there's a little bit of.
I didn't speak to that. So most people don't realize to actually enforce the Business and Professions Code, the carts have to have specific signage on them, and most of them do not. So it makes it difficult when somebody is actually taking the cart, other than we know that it's being taken. We can't cite on the Business and Professions Code because they don't have the proper signage. We just end up asking them to take it back. Most people do. We've had a few that don't, but most people do.
the whole process will take like 90 days. After the second reading.
Until the businesses actually have to be complying with the
That
provision.
gives them plenty of time. Okay.
So it does rely on the businesses to establish a plan, and then they'll file that plan with you?
They'll give us the plan on how they,
Or not
the
you,
idea
the
is we
city?
didn't want the city to be in the business of collecting shopping carts.
Yeah.
This is going to be their plan on how are they planning on getting those carts back to the businesses when identified, so.
Okay.
All right, any other questions from council? Any public comment on the proposed shopping cart ordinance? All right, appears to be no public comment.
Anybody want to do the introduction? I will make a motion for the introduction and first reading by title only of ordinance number 483-2025, adding chapter 8.10 pertaining to the unauthorized removal of shopping carts from retail establishments and to facilitate retrieval of abandoned shopping carts.
A second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item D, Finance. Council will appoint 2 members of the City Council to sit on the Ad hoc Finance Committee.
So we're coming into budget season. So we're just requesting that we have additional guidance from City Council in developing our budget for fiscal year '26, the upcoming fiscal year.
All right.
I've got time if somebody else can help me out on it.
I am interested pertaining to the budget, but I also want to leave room for any other council members that may want to
Dip their feet.
extend their hand into the budget process. So
So I just have a question. Weren't you both mayor and pro tem, weren't you guys on that before?
we were.
We were.
You did a good job on it, so I recommend that you two stay on it. I'm not interested in it.
Well, it does take some time, and so that's, scheduling becomes, I think, one of your issues too, but I don't know. I don't want to put you on the hook. I know I can schedule time, and I'm close, so if anybody else wants to join me.
I'm happy to continue and join this year's ad hoc committee. I know we've got some structural deficits to work through, and just like last year, we have a lot of work to do. So, but again, I want to leave it open for other council members if anybody does have a burning desire to be involved with the budget committee.
I know that Ken and you put in significant time, and I think we should continue on the road that we're on, especially given the changes to the budget that you were able to make. So I would defer to the two of you.
Okay.
Yes, I would, as much as I would love to, but I'm tied with my work. But I would, I think you guys are doing a phenomenal job, so I trust in you guys too.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I appreciate the kind sentiment from the council. So, looks like we are looking at the mayor and mayor pro tem as our 2 appointees. Do we have any public comment on the matter for the ad hoc committee?
Do you want to do a motion?
Yes, well, that's why I was checking for public comment first. Didn't want to go through with asking for a motion without any public input, so. All right.
I move to appoint Ken Palfini and Mayor Daryl Parham for the Ad hoc Finance Committee.
I second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on the matter?
No?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. And we'll move on to item E, Finance. Council will consider approval of a salary schedule for part-time employees.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. One of the things that the city does not have is a part-time salary schedule. We have a number of part-time employees. The library has some. There's a part-time person in the police department, but that person is on a regular salary, just working, a regular position, just working part-time. and we have a number of different positions in the fire department that are also part-time. Occasionally, there are other part-time positions, but not at this point. So what I wanted to do is develop a schedule for the part-time positions. We got into the fire department, it got a little bit complicated, and we needed to make sure we did it right. So that'll come to you at a future meeting. But what we wanted to do is to put in place a salary schedule for the people that are running the library. One of the things that has happened is that the library salaries have not kept really, normally people get step increases in the public sector, and that hasn't really happened in the library system. What happened was that the library staff that are there right now received a 12-cent increase because that was what it was necessary to bring them up to state law for the minimum wage. That just didn't seem appropriate to me. So what I'm proposing is to establish a salary schedule that starts at that point and has 5% steps above that, and also to create a senior librarian position that would be about 10% above, that salary schedule would be 10% above the original salary schedule. And this is just a good starting point, but at least it'll start putting into place some acknowledgement of people working there over time. They're doing a good job over there. They've cut back their hours early in '24, or I guess midpoint of '24, and it's still working. I see one here in the audience. I don't know if she wants to talk, but she is here and interested, and that's what I found. So I think they're doing a good job. I would recommend that you approve the salary schedule, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions from the council?
How many steps are there?
I've proposed 5 steps. That's the normal amount before longevity steps in the regular positions. There are some longevity steps. In fact, I think there's 3 longevity steps in one of the bargaining units, and I can't remember, the police have 2 longevity steps. So we're just starting here at this point to get the first 5 steps in.
And for the steps that they're based on time of service?
Technically, they're based on merit. I would say, given how long both of the, I can't remember how many years both of the individuals have been on staff, they probably should be eligible for step increases right now,
Okay.
once you pass this. So it's what we should be doing. The minimum wage is caught up with what we're paying, and I think that we want to make sure that we're a little bit more competitive than that. These are not highly paid positions, as you can see, but I think this is a good first step.
Well, that was the nature of my question, is I don't want to be punitive to our library staff that they have to start at step 1 if
Right.
they've had time served and are doing the job they're doing for the community, because I've had nothing but positive feedback from my experiences there and from the community members that I've talked to. So I think that this is good to define this and have those steps.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments from council?
Have we looked at any comparisons, or are you just kind of just going based on?
Really, what I did
Feel,
is I didn't do any comparisons as much as I simply started them
Something reasonable?
I started them where they are right now.
Okay.
And moved up from there. Part of it is that if we created when you're doing collective bargaining, if we created a new salary schedule that was significantly higher, that might cause some problems with the bargaining units. And so I did not want to trigger a Me Too clause. So I didn't do that.
Okay. Gotcha, thanks.
There may come a point in the future where the council may want to do salary surveys. It's obviously easier when you don't have a salary or a structural deficit, but there may come a time where that's entirely appropriate.
Okay.
I have a question. I'm looking at the part-time salary schedules. So they're a senior and a librarian assistant. That first step, that's what they're making right now.
Right now, the two individuals that are working for the library they're at the library assistant level of $16.50 per hour. That is the current state minimum wage.
Right, but you have the senior librarian that's only making $18.50, right?
Correct.
Do we
That-
have a senior?
Not at this time, no.
Not at this time, okay, but
No.
that's the first step, just that right there, and then I'm looking at.
All I
step
did
five.
was increase the $16.50 by
Okay.
10%.
Okay.
As I said, there may be a time to look at changing that, but, because I know that if you look in real dollars, when we did have a senior librarian before, I can't remember the exact salary schedule, but I believe it was more than that, and certainly in inflation adjusted.
Right.
It was, definitely.
No, I'm just
More than
wanting to
that.
make sure that's
Right.
where that's step
Right.
one right now.
Right, and, you know, if you wanted us to look at a higher step for that, we could. I was trying to get a start on the part-time, and then, you know, get it moving from there. You'll see a lot more complication when you see the fire.
Those are pretty low numbers.
Yeah, those are.
They are,
pretty low
and so that may be something that we need to look at, in terms of competitiveness.
So maybe we could get together on looking at some of that.
Yeah, I think the salary schedules, you know, doing a salary survey may be something for the ad hoc committee to look at with the budget process.
Okay.
'Cause,
And the other thing that I would note is, I'm used to seeing the pay schedules, that there is a controlling class rank. So usually it's about the third step in becomes the 10% for the bump for the supervisor as opposed to the bottom level one. So is there any thought in selecting a controlling rung of the pay scale to consider the 10% off of?
Are you saying that the 10% increase would be, instead of being 10% more than step one, it would be 10% more than step three?
Yes. And part of my reasoning on that is if we have somebody who, for instance, is a library assistant and has been a library assistant for a while,
Right.
and they're going to take the senior position,
Right,
then it's going to create a loggerhead in the steps for the senior position because step one for them would actually be lower. And I'm assuming that there's some controlling percentage that.
If, well, two things, probably if they promoted from, say, step three to the senior librarian, I don't think we have this policy in place, but typically you would go to the next step that is higher than that. So they would go from step three, library assistant, to, no, you're right, they would go to step, no, you're right, that might not be. We could look at that if you'd like to adopt the library assistant range this evening, and then we could come back with a proposal for the senior librarian based on something like that. I don't have a problem with that.
Or,
As you pointed out, they're very low ranges.
I would like to see us take a look at it, number one.
Okay.
We have two librarians, we don't want to create animosity right off the bat to selections until we have, at least in my opinion, until we've at least given them something decent to work for,
Okay.
to earn, and then take a look at the whole package, at where we should be.
and maybe that's something the ad hoc finance committee could do,
Yeah, we
but
could look at that maybe.
obviously my concern is if there isn't a policy in place that, for instance, if somebody's promoting, they will get the minimum of a 5% raise, then there wouldn't really be an encouragement or an incentive for
To go
someone to take that
take the-
supervisory role. Take on extra work, you
I
should
know.
get extra pay, yeah.
Oh, you get the title. Come on, this is a. Okay, but I think our first step is to make sure that we have at least something that's substantial to work for, or at least, okay?
So I want to make sure that I understand what the discussion, because there's a couple of alternatives. One would be to adopt these as they are now, have it reviewed by the ad hoc committee as part of the budget process and look at some sort of adjustment next year. One would be to adopt the base range now And then we could come back with a proposal, maybe even from the ad hoc committee sooner than that, if you wanted to.
I think we need to do it immediately. That would be my direction. One, because if they're making $16.50, I mean, that's,
My thought is perhaps adopting the lower rung, because I do believe that those people who are already employed should start the clock on their next step. And if we don't adopt it, then, am I wrong on that, Steve? The clock for their next promotional merit step wouldn't occur?
Right now, because we haven't had steps in the past, we don't have a process. I would suggest that,
I think either one of those would start the clock.
well, we do need to start the clock.
Yeah.
I think that I would probably tell you that I think they should be immediately eligible for a step increase based on the past. And we don't have a policy in place about how we place people in these steps, but you might want to give some flexibility to the city manager to be able to place people in those steps. I mean, I'm not going to be here, but it would be my intent to increase their pay immediately from what it is right now.
How many employees? There's 3? Or
There's 2.
There's
There were
2.
3 at one point.
There
There's
was
2
3,
currently.
Now there's 2.
Right, they're managing the library on a
Right.
sort of a, well, co-equal basis. We had talked about having a senior librarian at some point in the future. I kind of told them we were doing an experiment to see how things worked. I think they probably think the experiment lasted a little longer than they were expecting. I think that's fair. But I at least wanted to get this into place so that they were not being bumped up only by minimum wage increases.
Do you know if they have volunteers that come in?
I know that there's at least one volunteer that I've met, and I'm sure that there are, have 2?
2
Okay.
volunteers?
So I'm getting the signal that 2 volunteers,
I
yeah.
saw that,
That's
yeah.
how that
Okay,
works.
I just, okay.
Steve, the part-time employees, other than the finance committee looking at the actual dollar value of what they're making per hour, is there other considerations, such as CalPERS or anything that we need to keep in mind when deciding where to place them?
These 2 employees ended up working more than 1,000 hours in, I believe, 23, 24. And so they are eligible for PERS. The intent was not necessarily to make them eligible for PERS or for any other benefits other than the state mandated sick leave. So that's not a consideration. It is something that they are receiving as a benefit now, but it's because it's just like anybody that has worked for PERS before. When they work for a public agency, they get PERS. So, am I answering your question? Because I think I got part of it, but I'm not sure I got all of it.
I'm just making sure that when we're looking at the increase that potentially the finance committee agrees would be an appropriate bump for those individuals.
Yeah.
Is there any other percentages that are added to it that they need to take into consideration?
Well, there's PERS in this particular case because they're already on PERS. You'll also have things like workers' comp and Social Security and, help me out here, are there other ones?
Yeah, Social Security, Medicare, and I think what you're thinking of, Melissa, is the health insurance, which as long as they stay at 20 hours a week, they won't be eligible for health insurance. That was a bump we weren't expecting. And we had some penalties and retroactive amounts we needed to pay for that. So as long as they stay within the hours that they're working now, we'll be fine on that.
Okay, thank you.
And for me, that's where a wage increase becomes important as well.
Absolutely.
We're not going tit for tat here, so to speak. We are just kind of making sure we have employees that are happier to come to work. That's for me anyway. At $16 an hour, I would not be happy to come to work, but that's just me. But
If you're saying that we should probably recognize the good job that they're doing, then
Yes.
I would agree with that.
yes,
It was hard for me to go and tell them that they were getting to a 12% a 12-cent not 12%, a 12-cent increase. I had to tell them that was because of state law, not because we thought that was an appropriate amount. No, I'm serious. I mean,
I'm glad you had to go do it.
So for clarification, if the council so chooses to approve the salary schedule tonight,
yeah.
then the acting city manager or a future interim or full-time city manager, as city manager, based on the ad hoc committee's review of the financials, will be able to place them in their steps and/or positions if there is a, qualification to promote one or more to a senior librarian position. Is that a correct assumption?
So I heard two different threads, of which I'm probably going to say yes to both.
Okay,
I think that the first thread is that the city manager, whether acting, interim, or permanent, or regular, or whatever, would have the ability to place them on the appropriate step on
Yes.
the lower salary schedule. And then I'm also hearing that the ad hoc committee could come back with a recommendation on what to do with the appropriate starting step for the senior librarian.
right, and at that point, the city manager would be able to make that appointment if he or she found
Correct.
cause.
Yeah.
Okay,
So I two-part thing there, but I think both of them are true.
okay.
And if, one more question, is there any reason why, if it was an agreement of the council, we couldn't adopt the library assistant schedule, except make step one, the $17.33?
The only thing that I would be concerned about would be in the bargaining units, there is a Me Too clause in there, and whether or not that would be triggered by our part-time salary schedule, I don't know, but it would at least be arguable. So I don't know that we could simply do that today without, either knowing whether that would trigger or not, or without discussing it with the respective bargaining units to see whether they would believe that was cause for an increase to their units.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
All right, any other questions from council?
No, but I want to say that the library is crucial for the community here, since we've been here for the children and the community that summer, especially during the summer school or summer out. I mean, I've seen that they've done a phenomenal job. So I really think that, we should go ahead and give them
More
an
money.
incentive to work.
Do we have any public comment? No? Very quiet public so far. All right, any other questions from council on the matter?
No.
Nope.
Well, I would like to motion that we approve the salary schedule for part-time employees as written, and then assign that as an action item for the ad hoc committee to review at their first meeting for any adjustments and steps, as well as the acting city manager as part of that ad hoc committee. So there can be discussions at that time in regards to staff placement amongst the steps based on their service time and record.
I second.
All right, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, now we'll move on to staff reports, and we'll start with Director Porterfield.
I just want to say that we went live with our new software this week. We ran our first payroll out of the new software. Next AP run's going to be out of the new software. So I'm still doing a little bit of data entry, uploading data and balancing, but we're real close. We're going to be doing the whole budget process out of the new software. So excited about that we're finally getting there.
Excellent.
So, and I just want to thank our AP payroll staff, Christina, because she's been working very hard on this payroll piece part of it. So really appreciate her efforts.
All right, thank you.
Good.
Director Davis.
I got nothing to report this month. Thank you.
All right, Chief Mayberry.
1,912 incidents for the month of January, 51 cases, 23 arrests. I just want to thank Public Works. Fire Department was out digging out fire hydrants last week. I just want the community to understand, first and foremost, we're trying to keep the roads open for the local community first and foremost. Sometimes they get frustrated with us. You know, the plows are out, but when cars are driving, we have a large amount of traffic that's coming through here in snowstorms. I don't know why people don't heed the weather warnings, but packs the roads down to ice. It makes it almost impossible to plow the ice off of the road. But anyway, I just want to let them know that we are out there for them, the local community. We're trying to get them to where they need to go, whether it be school, home, work. But sometimes we have instances where we have to shut the road down, and I understand the frustration, but we're doing our best, so.
All right. Our city clerk?
No report.
All right. City manager?
Mayor, members of the council, first of all, I would like to give a report on behalf of Mr. Carter, who is right now the head coach for a Little League baseball team, and this is where they're picking their teams. So it's kind of like fantasy baseball, but in real life and with small children. So that's why he's not here. I like to see our staff involved in the community, and I think that's wonderful. So he has given me 3 bullets, which I would like to share with you, and hopefully you don't have any too many questions. The first one was that you had asked for an equipment inventory, and the fire department has been working on that. It may actually be done today. We'll see if it is. Obviously, it's slowed down some by every time that they have to respond to something, but the volunteers, the sleepers, whoever is doing it, they're working on it currently. They're probably going a little bit more in depth than what you were looking for, but it's a good exercise for them to do. Recently, the 2 resident sleeper firefighters have moved out, and that leaves the department with 5 right now, and the department is actively recruiting. The engine, I don't know the number. Our engine, it says our engine came back from the Palisades fire after working on it for 12 days and received praise from their strike team leader, who was from the Reno area. So wanted to pass that along, that our folks were down there fighting fire and doing a good job. So that concludes my fire department report.
Okay.
Speaking as city manager, this is my last meeting, and I have enjoyed working for all of you and working with all of you. I've enjoyed working with the staff. I think that together we've gotten a lot done. You have a great staff, and if you notice who talks during the meetings, it's not me. So the real work is happening at the staff level, and I really appreciate it. So anyway, I'm looking forward to re-retiring, and I will probably drop by from time to time to see how things are going, just because I've gotten a real sense of what a great little community Weed is, and I know that there are a lot of challenges, but I think you have the right people in place to make it happen.
All right. Well, thank you for your report, and we appreciate your service. And our city attorney?
No report this evening.
No report. All right.
I would sincerely like to thank Steve for actually stepping into a little bit of a fire zone, to borrow just a phrase. I mean, we had a lot going on. It seems that things have settled. Of course, they're never completely settled in the city, certainly, but they are calmer. I see the staff as reflecting that same kind of calmness. So thank you very much. Yeah.
All right. Well, that is the last of the staff reports. Before we adjourn to closed session, so we're now taking up agenda item 11, which is the administrative appeal of Stephen Duncan regarding the interim city manager Stephen Baker's termination of his employment as fire chief of the city of Weed. This administrative appeal is Mr. Duncan's right under the Firefighter Bill of Rights pursuant to Government Code Section 3254, subsection C. With the City Council for this procedure, a special counsel Danny Yu of Liebert Cassidy Whitmore, appearing as Saby counsel to advise the mayor and council regarding this administrative appeal. Before we proceed, let me explain the procedure for tonight. This is not an evidentiary hearing. The administrative appeal shall be determined by the City Council on the existing written administrative record, which is comprised of the termination letter of Mr. Baker to Mr. Duncan, Mr. Duncan's statement in response, Mr. Baker's rebuttal to Mr. Duncan's response, and Mr. Baker's further written statement and verbal summaries presented in open session by Mr. Baker and Mr. Duncan. In any public comment offered this evening, no witnesses will be called to testify by either party. Again, the matter shall be submitted on the existing administrative record, which will include any verbal statements made by the parties and by any public comment by members of the public. Public comment is not testimony. Mr. Duncan and Mr. Baker shall each be given 10 minutes to summarize their positions in open session. Because the burden is on Mr. Baker, he shall be allowed an additional 5 minutes for any rebuttal to Mr. Duncan's statement. After both Mr. Duncan and Mr. Baker have made their verbal statements, I will open public comment on this matter. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes per speaker. Again, public comment is not testimony. After the close of public comment, the council will adjourn to closed session to deliberate on the administrative record. After deliberation, a written statement regarding our determination shall follow within 30 calendar days. And with that, Mr. Baker, you may now be heard. You have 10 minutes to summarize your position.
So I do, just for the council's edification, so we have on Zoom, there's Danny Yu, who is legal counsel for the City Council related to this matter. And then on behalf of Mr. Duncan, I believe Kwok Pham has joined, and he may provide testimony or argument with respect to Mr. Duncan's appeal. And we also have on Zoom Pamela Graham, who is an attorney at Colantuno, Highsmith, and Watley, who is prepared to speak on Mr. Baker's behalf. So those 10 minutes for Baker, 10 minutes for Duncan, those could go to their legal representatives to
Understood.
make those arguments. So the first 10 minutes then would be for Ms. Graham.
Okay, and are we ready for Ms. Graham to begin her 10 minutes?
I'm ready, if
All right.
you all are.
And does our city clerk have a timer prepared?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, as soon as our city clerk gives the go-ahead, the timer has started, then we will begin. And make sure every party gets their fair amount of time. Okay, we are ready to start.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I am Pamela Graham. I'm an attorney with Colantuno, Highsmith, and Watley, and I'm here tonight on interim city manager Baker's behalf to present in this administrative appeal process the city manager's position on Mr. Duncan's termination as fire chief for the city of Weed. It's important to note that as a department head, Mr. Duncan's employment with the city was at will. This means that Mr. Duncan could be terminated with or without cause at any time. As City Manager Baker explained in Mr. Duncan's notice of termination provided on January 23, 2025, his employment was also subject to Government Code Section 3254, Subdivision C, which is referred to as the Firefighter Bill of Rights, and it speaks specifically to the process for terminating a fire chief. It explains, quote, "A fire chief shall not be removed by a public agency without providing that person with written notice, the reason or reasons for removal, and an opportunity for administrative appeal." It further explains, for purposes of this subdivision, the removal of a fire chief by a public agency for the purpose of implementing the goals or policies or both of the public agency, or for reasons including, but not limited to, incompatibility of management styles, or as a result of change in administration, shall be sufficient to constitute reason or reasons. And finally, it notes that nothing in this subdivision shall be construed to create a property interest if one does not otherwise exist by rule or law in the job of fire chief. On January 23rd, City Manager Baker provided Mr. Duncan with adequate and proper notice that he was being terminated effective immediately from his position as fire chief for incompatibility of management styles. The Firefighter Bill of Rights makes clear that providing notice of termination for the statutory reason of incompatibility of management style is sufficient to constitute a reason for termination. Nothing more is required. City Manager Baker also provided the requisite procedural opportunity for Mr. Duncan to file an administrative appeal, which he did on February 2nd. Mr. Duncan's 6-page appeal letter included 42 paragraphs of wide-ranging criticisms of city management and electeds' interactions with the city. It also put at issue Mr. Duncan's prior performance issues as fire chief with the city. While City Manager Baker appropriately and with due consideration to Mr. Duncan limited his notice of termination to the statutory basis for termination of incompatibility of management styles, Mr. Duncan's response opened up a number of issues that Mr. Baker felt obligated to respond to in this process. City Manager Baker appropriately took the opportunity to respond to these assertions, none of which are factually or legally valid, and none of which obviate the city manager's clear authority under the Firefighter Bill of Rights to terminate Mr. Duncan based solely on incompatibility of management styles. I'd like to highlight just a few points that are important to Council's consideration today, whether termination is proper. So first, Mr. Duncan is an at-will employee, and Mr. Baker appropriately terminated him for incompatibility of management styles. So generally, California employees are at will. It means that they serve at the will of their appointing authority. And that appointing authority here is city manager for the fire chief position. While some competitive civil services employees, as opposed to appointed department heads or officers, have a property right to their employment and must be provided due process and notice rights, they don't apply here to Mr. Duncan. Nor did WEED's personnel rules change his at-will status. So WEED Personnel Policy 106.1 makes clear that all department heads are at-will employees with no right to continued employment or pre- or post-disciplinary due process or evidentiary appeal. The fire chief is a department head. And Section 1002.3, which governs disciplinary procedures like a Skelly hearing, make clear that it only applies to the city's for-cause employees, again, not the police chief, or excuse me, the fire chief. The WEED Municipal Code is also consistent on this point. So it says at Section 2.36.040, subdivision F4, that governs competitive service, that the fire chief is excluded from competitive service and it identifies him as a department head. And finally, Mr. Duncan's December 2017 offer letter also identifies him as a department head. While it references personnel rules for for-cause employees, it warned that council could amend personnel rules. And in fact, the council did amend those personnel rules about 10 months after his offer letter, making the personnel policies for any for-cause termination requirement inapplicable to department heads. It's also important to note that neither the then city manager nor the prior version of the personnel rules can override the council approved municipal code, which is unequivocal that the fire chief serves at will at the pleasure of the city manager. In conclusion on this point, at-will employees, like department heads, may be disciplined or separated at will, with or without cause, and without following the disciplinary procedures in the personnel policies. Mr. Duncan was properly terminated as an at-will employee under city policies and legal principles that govern at-will employees. He was appropriately terminated under the Firefighter Bill of Rights for incompatibility of management styles, and this was basis enough. It's also basis enough for the council tonight to uphold city manager's decision and to find termination proper. The second point I will note is that Mr. Duncan has received the procedural notice and opportunities to be heard that the law entitles him. Mr. Duncan is entitled under Government Code Section 3254, Subdivision C, which again is the Firefighter Bill of Rights, only to written notice specifying the reason or the reasons for his removal. This reason can include incompatibility of management styles. He received that notice from city manager in the January 23 notice of termination. He's also entitled, under Government Code Section 3254C, to an administrative appeal. That process is being respected tonight. While Mr. Duncan's attorney has asserted that he's entitled to a full evidentiary hearing before an administrative law judge, rather than the appeal process that we're following tonight, that law does not support his position. As an at-will employee, Mr. Duncan is not entitled to a pre-disciplinary hearing or a Skelly hearing, since he has no property interest in his position. And for that principle, I'll note that there's relevant case law, the case Brinker versus City of Long Beach, which the legal site is 16 Calap 4th, 1795. And just like he's not entitled to a pre-disciplinary hearing, that same legal authority makes clear that he's also not entitled to a full evidentiary hearing before an administrative law judge. Rather, the administrative appeal needs to only provide him the right to clear his name, a name clearing opportunity, by allowing him to make a public statement, followed by City Council's determination as a neutral hearing body to decide the appeal. Council has not been involved in the underlying termination, and nor was the fire chief a direct report to council. And so council meets that criteria as a neutral body to decide this appeal. Third, I just want to briefly note the additional points in city manager's response to Mr. Duncan's appeal, which in fact would constitute cause for Mr. Duncan's termination. While I reiterate that no finding of cause is required here, I include just a few of these points as an additional basis why City Manager Baker did not change his initial decision to terminate Mr. Duncan. First, Mr. Duncan had been dishonest and incompetent in the performance of his duties. Upon Mr. Baker's appointment as interim city manager, he discovered that Mr. Duncan was being paid for overtime, even though he was exempt from overtime requirements under the Fair Labor Standard Act. City Manager Baker also noted Mr. Duncan's insubordination. As detailed in his response letter, City Manager instructed Mr. Duncan not to be involved in procuring storage space due to Mr. Duncan's business selling such storage units, and instructed him on conflicts of interest and self-dealings law that he should have been aware of. These actions were important in City Manager's decision not to alter his January 23 decision to terminate. They led to City Manager Baker's complete loss of trust in Mr. Duncan's leadership, satisfying him that termination was the right decision. We urge the council to find the same. City Manager Baker was authorized to terminate Mr. Duncan as an at-will employee at any time in his role as fire chief. Mr. Baker appropriately terminated Mr. Duncan under the Firefighter Bill of Rights for incompatibility of management styles. No more basis was required for his termination decision, and Mr. Duncan was provided with all of the procedural rights afforded to him as an at-will employee without any property interest in his position. He's entitled to no more than what he received, and it's now up to you as a neutral body to review that decision. And with that, I'll reserve any additional time for rebuttal.
All right, well, that 10 minutes is up, and thank you for your portion there. All right. So now, Mr. Duncan will have 10 minutes for his rebuttal. And are we going to be hearing from Mr. Duncan directly or from Mr. Kwok Pham?
Yes, good evening, Council. My name is Kwok Pham. I represent Mr. Duncan. I apologize for not being there in person because of the distance and the weather. My belief is that Mr. Duncan is entitled to be heard by an administrative law judge. However, I will present Mr. Duncan's case and reserve our right to have the appeal heard by an administrative judge. And I would like to have that on the record. Okay, so Mr. Duncan has been a civil servant for 35 years. He has impeccable record, and he has made significant contribution for his service for the city. He had no complaint whatsoever before Mr. Baker joined the the city. As an interim city manager who has been there for only 6 months, Mr. Baker has not been familiar with the city and the internal politics. Prior to this termination, Mr. Mazzoni, City Councilman Mazzoni, has caused 2 managers to quit because of his hostile environment. There was an incident of yelling and shouting at the former public work manager, Craig Sharp. And according to the former city manager, Tim Rundle, mafioso-like threat were issued against Director Sharp. Then the former city manager, Tim Rundle, had to quit himself because he could not stand this hostile work environment created by Mr. Mazzoni. From the start of his tenure with the city council, Mr. Mazzoni has been critical of the fire department. In his first meeting, he made inappropriate age discrimination comment. We know that from witnesses that he has, with city clerk, has been making inappropriate derogatory comments against Mr. Duncan's physical appearance, contrary to the city personnel policies. Mr. Rundle has filed a complaint against Mr. Mazzoni. Nothing has been done. Okay. The reason raised in the termination letter is incompatible management style. We do not believe that Mr. Baker can substantiate this claim. What are these incompatible management style? Poor management style. How are they incompatible? What detriment have they caused to the operation of the fire department, to the safety and the welfare of the city residents? Okay. Mr. Baker seemed to pick out some terminology from the manual and tailor facts and false allegation. Okay. We'll address those point by point right now. First of all, Mr. Duncan had not received any complaint about his management style from the city resident, from the previous city managers. I believe there were two. No complaint from the firefighter who reported to him. I'm not sure if Assistant Chief Brian Carter and the firefighter were there at the meeting. You can ask them yourself to determine whether there's any problem with Mr. Duncan's management style. There is zero complaint, and there's no discipline action prior to Mr. Baker took on his job, his position with the city. We believe that Mr. Baker, unfamiliar with the politics of the city and hostile work environment, acted on the behest of Mr. Mazzoni. Okay. I believe that from what I heard, Mr. Baker will no longer go with the city tomorrow, and Chief Mayberry will be the city manager. It is the belief of Mr. Duncan that he has no issue whatsoever in working with the fire department for the history of his employment with the city. He has excellent working relationship with Chief Mayberry. He hasn't heard anything from Chief Mayberry about his management style. As for the other allegations, there is an allegation about, you can see that from Mr. Baker's response that he was too lazy to look up things on his own when Mr. Duncan could not give him information about resolution off the top of his head. Mr. Baker accused Mr. Duncan incompetent. Mr. Baker raised the issue of the approval of the fire road access. His account showed that he did not understand how the fire department work to approve fire road access. The culture of the fire department of the city of Wade is to work cooperative and then provide good services to the city residents and businesses. The fire department do not carry an adversarial attitude against city residents and business. About the locker, it is the duty of the city manager to buy material and equipment for the city departments. Mr. Baker did not do that. Okay, so there was an existing locker there used by both the fire department and the police department. Okay? Mr. Duncan is not a lawyer, okay? After being told not to engage in the sale of that locker, he stopped doing that, okay? The locker now belongs to the Rosebud Mill, okay? It is located on the property that's not within the city limit. It has nothing to do with the city. The city has no jurisdiction over what the mill own or not own. Okay? So that point does not apply. It's made up. Okay? It had no significance whatsoever about Mr. Duncan's competence or insubordination. There's no insubordination. Mr. Duncan followed the direction and stopped. And there was no financial distraction involved. Okay? I don't know why it was brought up. Okay? Maybe it's brought up in desperate attempt, grasping at straw. Okay? Now, in terms of overtime payment, the issue of overtime payment, whether to the fire chief or the firefighters, had been discussed many times. Okay, Mr. Rundle, the Assistant Fire Chief Brian Carter, and Mr. Duncan himself have on numerous occasions explained to Mr. Mazzoni and other members of the council and employers and manager of the city over and over that the overtime payment come from the contract with Cal EOS and Cal Fire. Okay, the city obligated to pay the member of the fire department overtime payment when a strike team goes out. Okay, there was no fraud. Okay, there was no concealment. It's known. The issue is brought over and over. Okay, Mr. Mazzoni seemed not to understand it. Okay. He has something against the fire department and Mr. Duncan, okay? This is detrimental to the operation of the city. This is detrimental to the safety of the city. Mr. Baker was in a hurry to fire Mr. Duncan before his term is over, okay? He left the city with one sick fireman manning the fire stations, okay? And now, from what I heard, the city fire department is still overstaffed, okay? And when people hear about all these dirty tricks, backstabbing, toxic environment, and hostile culture, how are you, okay, going to attract talents to the city? Not only the fire department, the city manager, the city public work, okay?
Mr. Pham, we are at time.
All of this is detrimental to the city. To sum up, okay? Please take the interest of the city in heart, okay?
Mr. Pham,
Please
we
respond
are
to
at
Mr.
time now.
Rondo letter complaint. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's gone too far.
Okay, Mr. Baker, do you wish to offer, or does your council wish to offer rebuttal? If so, we will allot 5 minutes.
Yes, just briefly. 3 points I want to quickly make. So the first is that, as I mentioned in my opening statements, the Firefighter Bill of Rights provides expressly that it can be the sole basis for termination that there's incompatible management style. As an at-will employee, nothing more needs to be stated. And for all of the reasons I already mentioned, there was proper process in bringing this as the issue and the reason for termination. While it's true that Mr. Baker's last day as interim city manager is today, it does not change the process or the result here. There's no reason that the issue should be postponed until there's a new city manager in place. Mr. Duncan, his conduct is incompatible with any management style that requires the city manager to delegate authority to a department head and to trust that the department head will exercise that authority in compliance with the manager's direction and not in conflict with law. Based on Mr. Baker's experience, he made that finding. He issued his directive to terminate, and Mr. Duncan, therefore, has already received the due process that he was entitled here. And council may uphold it based solely on Mr. Baker's finding of incompatible management style. The second point that I want to just make, because I think it's necessary for purposes of a record, is that there is no right to any proceeding beyond what we have done here for an at-will employee. Well, Mr. Duncan wants a full evidentiary hearing before a third party outside the city, such as an administrative law judge, that's only required for firefighters with a property interest in their positions, who are then entitled, as I explained, to certain pre- and post-deprivation due process, and where they have no MOU or memorandum of understanding that establishes those disciplinary procedures. But by contrast, an at-will fire chief, like Mr. Duncan, has no property interest in his position, and he's not entitled to due process before loss of his job. Rather, the administrative appeal for an at-will fire chief is more akin to, as I said, a name-clearing opportunity, a public opportunity to make a statement, which is what we're doing here. And with that, I will cede the rest of my time.
I would
Okay.
like to add, have a 1 minute for an important point that the council need to hear.
So at this point, we have exhausted our time, and everyone has been given their allotted time according to the procedure. We do need to move on to public comment, and we have quite a bit of public here today. And so we will now open public comment, again reminding that each speaker will have 3 minutes to speak. We will be diligently trying not to go over, and neither Mr. Baker nor Mr. Duncan will be able to speak again because they have already had their opportunities as outlined in the process. So I would like to invite our public to come up and give their public comment. If you do choose to do so, please state your name and address per city policy. Yes, please. Yeah, it's important for the people that are watching the stream at home or in the future that they can hear. So please, if you come up for a comment, be it the public or staff, please utilize the microphones.
Okay. Nice to meet you all. My name is Usmano Sanchez. I am the Recruitment and Retention Officer here at the Lee City Fire Department. It's finally nice to meet you guys. I have a statement from Brian Carrion. He's a fellow firefighter that could not make it. He's now a paramedic for McLeod, and he couldn't be here today. Dear members of the City Council, I am writing this letter to express my unwavering support for Chief Steve Duncan and to highlight his profound impact that he's had on the fire service, not only to the city of Weed, but across the country. His suspension is deeply troubling to me and many others who have had the privilege of working under his leadership. I am unable to attend the hearing, but I wanted my voice to be heard. I believe it is a disservice of the department and the community, and to remove such a man of such integrity, knowledge, and dedication. Chief Duncan is more than just a fire chief. He's a mentor, a leader, a role model who has shaped the careers of countless first responders. His commitment to training, developing, and guiding firefighters and EMS personnel has elevated the standards of the service in Weed and beyond. He instills discipline, confidence, and excellence in those he teaches, producing first responders who are not just competent but elite in their field. His ability to lead in both emergency situations and daily operations has saved lives, strengthening the firefighting community. When I moved to Weeds, Chief Duncan gave me an opportunity that changed the course of my career. He worked with me with my paramedic training schedule, making adjustments that were not easy, but it was necessary for my growth. The kind of support is rare, and it speaks to his character. He generally wants to see his firefighters succeed. He has demonstrated time and again that he puts well-being of his team and the community above all else. Without his generosity and strong character, we would have been able to attend this College of the 60s and continue my career as a firefighter. I urge the City Council to reconsider a man who has dedicated his life in public service. Losing a leader like Chief Duncan would have not only be tremendous loss for the fire department, but for the city of Weed as a whole. His guidance, experience, and mentorship are irreplaceable, and I hope you recognize the invaluable role that he plays in the shaping of the future of the emergency services in our community. Thank you for your time and consideration. Brian Carrion, firefighter/paramedic. And I couldn't put it in any other way of how I feel about Chief Duncan. Thank you for your time. Again, my name is Osmar Sanchez, and I got 10 seconds. The inventory was done on everything, down to the biggest tools that we have to every count of every Band-Aid that we have on every bag. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comment? All right, well, if there is no other further public comment, I will now close public comment and accept the motion to adjourn to closed session to deliberate.
Just for the record, if there's any public comment on closed session items B through D as well, this would be the time, just so that we don't have to come back for public comment on those items.
Thank you. We do have other items after this in closed session. Do we have any public comments on any of the other items for our closed session outside of this deliberation for Mr. Duncan's appeal?
Yeah, if he wants to give public comment.
Okay. So it looks like we have no further public comment. We have one more public comment. All right. We can't hear the audio, so we're going to have to start time over so we can hear.
I would like it known if Mazzoni is in the closed session, it will be an unfair process.
I need name and address, please.
What?
We can hear you now. Can you please
Okay.
state your name and address, and then we'll restart your 3 minutes.
My name is Ashley Allen, and I am not comfortable giving anybody here my address. I do live in Hammond Ranch. I will give that. But I would like it known that if Mr. Mazzoni is in the closed session, it will be an unfair process. And I believe he should not be allowed in.
Okay, do you have any
That's all.
further comment?
Nope, that's it for now.
Okay. All right. Do we have any other public comment that is possibly by Zoom? I want to make sure we don't exclude anybody. All right. Any discussion amongst council? I guess we're not going to have a discussion amongst council for closed session. Do we have a motion to adjourn to closed session?
I so move.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded. All in favor of adjourning to closed session?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, we will now adjourn to closed session.